All right, everyone. Hello, thank you for coming. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Gunn. I'm coordinator of digital scholarship here at Catholic University of America Libraries. My moderator today is Michaela Champion. She's one of our graduate library pre-professionals. So she'll be monitoring the chat for any questions that come in. So feel free to ask questions. I'm hoping to provide a lot of great information for you, tips and best practices, I say, for you to think about before you begin your text data mining project. So let us get going here. All right, so this is our agenda for today. I should mention this is an introductory session so that what I say may be highly relevant to your particular research project if you have one, or it may not very much be. So it's basically looking at all the number of questions at 30,000 feet. So just to let you know. So the first question is, actually, I should go back here. There we go, back here to this, just to give you a quick overview. Do you want to start a particular project is number one. Most sometimes after today's session, I may end up discouraging you, and I don't want to do that. But I wanted to give you a realistic assessment of what is going on with the entire process of doing a digital project of this nature. So you're looking at research questions, what is that you are trying to articulate, what issue problem that you're going to solve. That's usually half the battle. So you have the proper parameters to a project, then you're in very good shape. Third, we have texts and tools. Where do I find the texts? Where do I find the tools? How do I go about manipulating such texts once I have them? I mean, lots of different questions to consider. Number four, legal and ethical issues. Jiminy Cricket, copyright, fair use, digital rights management. Oh, and did I mention AI, chat AI, and all that sort of stuff that's come to the fore in multiple dimensions? So I mentioned it just to say things are always changing. So you'll have to be aware of that. You have to ask yourself, number five, funding and expenditures. How much time, money, time, labor, effort are you going to put into this? Again, this is very important to plan this out before you take the deep dive. And last, I hope you're going to want to create something and have something, a final product. Will it be a paper? Will it be a website? Will it be discoverable? What's your legacy on this final project going to be? So, all right, let's dive right in. So starting the project, the most logical question, right? Should I actually embark on this thing? Let's see. So my experience has been with students, and I have to say occasional faculty, that people will begin a project because it's a neat idea. They love the particular digital technology, that sort of thing, and they'll begin working on the project. And then somewhere along the line, they run into problems. So I had one particular PhD student in biblical studies who had started putting biblical citations into Excel. And there's data and text and that sort of thing. And she was about 2,000 rows in and realized that maybe she should talk to someone. So she came to me and she wanted to move it to something else. She didn't know what, but she just couldn't work with Excel. And at that point, I could not really help her in that regard. So she was sort of halfway done with her project anyway. And I sort of shrugged my shoulders and said, I don't know how I can help you in this regard. That was sort of a sad moment, but it definitely behooves you to plan ahead. All right. So things to consider. So research questions. So your project you should be shooting towards trying to get something published. What is exactly your research question that you want to answer, that sort of thing. You want to look at your project parameters. Are you looking at everything from a particular time and place, or are you going to be highly selective in what you're going to be examining? Because that will determine how much time and effort and all that down the road. If you're looking at 30 texts to 300 texts, that could be very much a problem. So you have to be careful of that. What do you hope to prove? What is the originality of your research topic? So just to give you an example, Matt Jockers, he's a digital humanist. He wrote a book called Text Analysis with R for Students of Literature, and he published it in 2014, and it was basically a work through project book for how to look at Moby Dick in a new way, to examine it for word frequency and that sort of thing. So we put the code in, and it was a reproducibility, but it was in a new way. So there was a lot of computational work that was done, and it was aimed at testing and rejecting and reconfirming the knowledge that we already had about Moby Dick. So we know that Moby Dick was an aberration. The book is an aberration, that it was kind of odd, and that was well known. What was interesting is that Mac Jockers was asked about this from my fellow colleague. This is what I'm doing. He said, and his colleague said, "Well, we already know all this stuff." But Matt Jockers' response was, "Well, now we know it in a new way." And so he brought new evidence to this equation that, yes, in fact, Moby Dick is a very weird book compared with a lot of the other books. So traditionally, if you're studying 19th century American literature, you'd be looking at, say, 30 titles, for example, and seeing, what is examining that. But you could also look at hundreds of titles from the same period and get new results from that. So looking at from micro level for Moby Dick, it provides, it reaffirms research that's already been done. At the same time, if you stepped away from, look at macrocosm and looked at 19th century American literature, you can see a different perspective when you're looking at hundreds of titles in that regard. So I should also mention that, scholarship is never neutral. You can always have someone come later and improve your work. So there's a website out there called Quantita, and what they did is they replicated Jockers' research, but they did it with more efficient coding. So they really shortened the code. So again, this was something, an original aspect to this particular thing, and it's available up on the website. So there you go. What do you have to do? Next one is text data mining. So what is the best way to go in that regard? So you have to be aware of, the shiny new thing, I call, is very exciting. Right now we have Chat GPT, very shiny and new, quote unquote, to many of us, to scientists and that out there. AI has been around for years, and this has been around for several years, various versions of Chat GPT, but now it's hit the populace, so everyone's very excited by that, and who knows what's going to come out of that. So you have to be very careful about that. You have to be careful too, again, with regards to text data mining. There's a case, I think it was back in the late 19th century, before computers, where two sisters decide they were going to look at the word length of words in Shakespeare's text. So what they did is they had one person would document each word. The other sister would count out the length in letters of a word, and she would say, 4 7, 3, that sort of thing. And the other sister would write that down. So they're able to go through the entire canon. And I don't know how long it took, but that's what they did. And they were able to find out, how lengthy the words were in Shakespeare's canon. So you don't need to use software at all if you want to do that kind of work and that, but I recommend computers are useful in that. So there you go. So do you have the text available to you? Are the texts out of copyright? If in copyright, are they accessible through various platforms? So there's different ways you can get copyrighted material, but you sort of have to know what's out there. And hopefully I'll show you some ways that you can do that. You'll also need to consider if you have the training. So if you've got the training to use the software, that's great. If you don't, are you willing to learn, or can you bring on someone, and what sort of attribution are you going to give to them to your project? So it's something to consider. And related to that, do you know people? So if you don't have the training, do you know people who have? So we had a faculty member who was working on an NEH grant with Library of Congress, and she created this great website for a particular journal that wasn't indexed anywhere. It was a journal from the Global South, and she had managed to get permission to do it. So she indexed all of it and put it in WordPress website, which was fine. It's searchable in that. The problem was there was a dimension of it that she wanted to put in, and there was a plugin called ZotPress. So she did not know how to do it. She reached out to me. I said, yeah, I could probably do it, but it'll take me hours. I know a guy, our web services librarian, was able to meet with her, and in a couple hours he was able to do it. So that actually worked out quite well. So I often get questions like this of a very specific nature: ZotPress and WordPress. Hey, how do you know I use WordPress? I mean, there could be an amazing learning curve there. So just to let you know. And then training and tools. So, there's time to learn tools, finding the tools and learn how to use them. That can be quite time consuming. So it's something to consider. And then looking at the final project, are you looking at presentations, papers, journal articles? What is it that you want to do? Are you going to make it discoverable? Where are you going to curate it? Are you just going to let it rot away somewhere, or are you going to put it into a digital repository, put it on the web? How are you going to make it discoverable? So you got to think about the entire process. Let's see. So what exactly is a project? So the great thing about projects is that they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that's always something useful. Eventually, whatever you're working on will come to an end. So it's usually a sequence of related activities that you can do alone, or you can do with other people. So if you're going to be doing either one, you're going to need some level of project management skills moving forward, plotting out how you're going to go about it. And there's software out there that can be used to do that. So again, something you have to think about moving forward. So again, I mentioned questions. What are the issues or problems that you're trying to solve? So it's good to spend time and just articulate what it is that you want to accomplish. Regarding the development of resources, so you could look at software, all the types of softwares out there. I'll show you how you can do that. The texts, what are you doing? Are you looking at, scanning 10 books, for example, or is it 100, or is it 1,000? All of a sudden, your project becomes much larger. So scalability is often an issue. You're also looking at stuff like web scraping or APIs, that sort of thing. So you always need to consider that for resources that can save you a lot of time, but there's a downside, especially if you have to clean whatever data sets that you data that you get from websites or what have you. Let's see, require an audience. Your work that you do, is it just for you, or is it you want to convince other people of something? So definitely requires an audience and or possibly other participants in your project. Will your project become part of a larger project, something else? So something to consider. And then I mentioned again, where's the landing page here? Where does everything end? What sort of products do you want to get out of this? So sources and materials. So you want to look at these particular ideas here, like scarcity and abundance as something, and that includes people and resources. So, what are the sources that are available to you? So if you're doing a text data analysis project, do you have access to the scanners? Okay. How are they OCR? What is their OCR capability? How are the texts? How good are the texts? Are they really nasty looking? Are they coming from a microform? Oh, those are kind of ugly, and I could show you ugly ones, I'll tell you. Or are they coming from nice text? Maybe the script in the particular manuscript they're using, you just simply cannot read it. It's almost, if you're transcribing it, it's almost difficult to do it, So, I had one student who came to me who wanted to scan 100 books for a project for a semester. And, I said, oh, gee, the amount of labor to do that, assuming that we had all the books, we had the labor involved in that, possible copyright issues, where's this data file going to go? We just can't hand it over and give it to you where you can just go put up on the web or something like that. So there's a lot of these questions that have to be asked. Primary and secondary sources. So this is interesting. You'll have a lot of these subscription databases from vendors. For example, Gale, they put out a lot of data sets in that. Some of them are accessible through the Digital Scholar Lab platform, which we at Catholic University have, and you can go in and you can grab that text and do stuff with it. So it's great. We have HathiTrust. You can also do that. So the text, so you get stuff that's within copyright, but still usable for you for your text data mining project. You can use texts from such places like Gutenberg. Those that material is out of copyright, which is fine. You just go in, download, use it. But the question you have to ask yourself is that the best edition of the work that you're searching? So if your source material is flawed, it doesn't matter what sort of text analysis you do on it, it will also too be flawed. So you need to be looking at questions such as like that. So feasibility of your project, and I mean that access, are you able to access those texts? So I had a former colleague who's working on his PhD dissertation, and he identified a manuscript in Portugal, and he flew out there. He had assurances they'd be able to access the material, the manuscripts. And unfortunately, he flew out there and they would not allow him in, regardless of what he had. So there he was, stuck, dead in the water. His dissertation was dead in the water, so he had to give it up. And I always thought that was kind of sad. But that's something that you also have to consider, that maybe just a good old-fashioned print material exists, but you can't get at it for whatever reason. And last, you have quality and complexity. So if you've seen a few medieval texts out there, original manuscripts from the medieval period, they can be so excruciatingly hard to read that OCR is just, it's useless. And you'll have to do manual transcription on that, provided that you can read, medieval English, medieval German, Old Saxon, that sort of thing. So it becomes very, very cumbersome and time consuming if you have to transcribe all of that. So the big question is, will AI be able to answer a lot of that? There's a website out there called Transcribe Us that is improving all the time in how to read the text artificially in that. So things may be moving in the right direction, but it's something to consider for your project. All right, so research questions. So having the right research question is half the battle. So how do you know you have a good idea? Well, you have to ask yourself, has an audience of more than you? If it's just you working on it, hey, that's fine. But the larger question is, are you making a contribution to your field? So you want to know, does it challenge disciplinary assumptions? Does it innovate a new method or approach to a particular issue? Does it elucidate its own value? So others say it is interesting, right? So tell me more, that sort of thing. So people get excited by hearing your project. And does it improve on previous efforts? So, scholarship is about building on the work of others. So does it improve on previous efforts that have come beforehand? So the Matt Jockers example, that would be an example of where something has been improved, even if it's just an issue of reproducibility. That's still valuable, but it's because it was in a new method, new approach. So, thing to consider. So what's a bad idea? I always like to throw this up just to let people think about it. If you are working by yourself, great. You have to convince other people that's a good idea or not. But if you're working with other people on this project, you have to understand that other people have opinions too. So it's just not you working alone in the lab, so to speak. So you can start a project without considering your commitment to it. I mentioned it, the time and people commitment for hardware and software generally underestimated. Oh boy, are they generally underestimated. So you just don't know what's going to be happening with other people and their lives and that. So you have to factor in that you're not going to do a project with a straight line from A to B. That's not going to happen. All right. I worked on a project with a colleague on and off for a few years. At the end, we didn't produce anything from it. We had our own commitments, that sort of thing. So it was low priority. But, she ended up passing away. So now I have this data, partial data on a number of this project, based on particular text of an author, and there's nothing I can do with it essentially. So it's dead. It's gone away, and it's kind of sad, but it's something that happens. So looking at someone else's project and attempting to duplicate it wholesale. So you may want to look at letters that were written by soldiers from the Richmond area during the Civil War, which could be quite interesting. But you say, well, I'm going to do the same thing during that time period, but I'm going to think of Portland, Maine, I guess. Well, okay, you could technically do that, but what is the point? What is the larger issue here? So you have to look at the larger issue that surrounds that particular project that you're working on. So last, what will end the project? What do you consider to be project success? So I worked on a campus project here. I had a faculty member who was interested in recording oral history of the Detroit Chaldean community in the surrounding area. And we end up interviewing individuals, and we met people we interviewed, and it was great. But we didn't really have a limit. Were we going to do 100 interviews? Were we going to do 200? That sort of thing. And you always have, when you get up to 200, you're going to have diminishing returns of what people are talking about their lives, that sort of thing. So, hey, guess what? It can't go on forever. And we eventually ran out of grant money. So we were able to get a documentary out of it and a paper. But we wanted a website. We actually had a website, but we weren't able to maintain it with money. So that website disappeared. So I like to talk about these digital humanities projects in particular because they sort of show you that you need to do a lot of planning. And we did quite a bit of planning on it, but we also didn't know, where exactly are we going to end? When can we say this project is a success? So looking at the significance of your project. So how does your project contribute to a particular discipline or field? Does it contribute to the humanities or sciences more generally? What is the impact of your research, right? So what the question is, what are you going to change to impact? What needs changing is the question that you need to focus on. And innovation, that's always a wonderful word. So, creating something new, and then you can prove that it's something new. Does it offer an interesting approach to tackling a problem? Is a technical innovation, that sort of thing? Does it make use of existing technology but in a new way? Does it improve? It is the project collaboration that is innovative. So, two different groups from two different institutions, two different countries, perhaps, working on a particular, bringing together a unique set of resources to work on that project. So, excuse me. So does it address a longstanding humanities or science issue in a new way? So things to think about on your research project. Okay, so third one up here is texts and tools. Where can I find the texts and manipulate them? I'm rubbing my hands together like an evil scientist. How do I go about doing that? So locating, acquiring texts. So each of these has advantages and disadvantages. So the platforms and tools are ready to go. So you can look at text availability and the option of adding your own texts. So things like the repositories, so the Registry of Research Data repositories will have a ton of stuff there. Harvard Dataverse will have material as well. These are just examples. You can look at subscription databases. I mentioned Gale Digital Scholar Lab. There's ProQuest TDM Studio. There's JSTOR, Constellate. There's HathiTrust. All these different places, they have not only lots of data and text data specifically, but they have a platform where you can use the material and use particular tools that are embedded in that platform to do research. So that's another way that you can look at. I mentioned Gutenberg before. And of course, there's nothing wrong with building your own corpora so you can scan OCR. You can do web scraping API. One nice things about the subscription databases that university libraries have, like Gale Digital Scholar Lab, is that you can scan your own material, and then you're able to upload it into, for example, Gale Digital Scholar Lab, and then incorporate your scanning with the material that you found in their databases. So you can do a lot of little mixing and matching, that sort of thing. So what happens is that you can access the books and that, and you can create the personal free accounts and work that way. You can make the collections public if you want, for other researchers to access as well. So what I always tell students is you got to know what's in a particular database, what's included and what's not. So it's good to look at the scope and the format, that sort of thing, with regards to the data set. So you can only go back, 50 years a data set, or you can go back much further, or excludes newspapers, for example, that sort of thing. So if you're not interested in newspapers, great. But if you are, then that's something that you have to consider, the quality of what you're getting, what's included and what's not. All right. Another thing you have to look at, I call obstacles, and believe me, they are obstacles. Licensing restrictions. So you have to reach out to a particular sometimes you have to reach out to a particular platform and request access to something. They could come back and they could say, give you less of what you requested, which will make your research project sort of diminished. Or they could just say simply, no, that's not going to happen. So that can be a possibility. Second, you have user credentials required. So something to consider: if you do leave Catholic University, you no longer have access to the Gale Digital Scholar Lab, unless you go to another university that has or whatever. So you'll have to take your data with you. Don't forget to do that. So you do have to have the user credentials. You also have paywalls for whatever reason. Database subscriptions, journal subscriptions, that sort of thing. They'll often have paywalls, which will limit your the difficulty of being able to use that material. And then quite often, you have terms of service. So whether it's, they may be too confining, there may be too many restrictions, or they could limit data discoverability once your project is finished. So these are things that you do need to be aware of. All right, so what can we do with text? So a lot of cool things that you can do here. I mentioned a number of these quantitative and qualitative methods that you can use. Let's see, you have, you can categorize documents, through information retrieval, supervised learning, that's unsupervised learning. Machine learning and AR, two big areas in the area of unsupervised learning. I'm not going to get into them now, but there are ways that you can go about looking at the material. You can also contrast the vocabulary of different corpora, pulling together two different sets and examining them that way. You can also, excuse me, you can also trace the history of practical features, words, or phrases over time. So looking at something like n-grams is a quick way to do that. There's a whole issue of clustering, features that can be associated in a given corpus of documents. So in other words, so for example, you have topic modeling that you can use. That's sort of a version of unsupervised learning. You have entity extraction. So if you're looking at, say, pulling names from a data set, or geolocations, you can do things like that. And then you have visualization, and visualization is this whole new, data visualization. There's so many different software packages and stuff like that here. I just use something very simple like word clouds to demonstrate. Something as simple as word clouds can be useful but limited. Once you have your data set, you have to take out the stop words, words like the and a and an, so that the most popular words that come up in a word cloud will be front and center. So that's a very basic way of doing something, but it does involve steps in there. So again, the summary is, what is it that you want to do? What is your research question? What text do you want to use? Are the texts available in machine readable form? What is the quality of the text? And again, do they need to be, corrected, cleaned up? So I occasionally get questions, Kevin, I want to do this and this and this with this particular data set. How do where can I go? And I'm like, gee, off the top of my head, I don't know of any software you can use for that. But hey, there's this website out there. It's called Tapor. And it's a wonderful website. That lists 1,667 tools. They keep adding to it. There's everything in there from legacy software going back to the 60s to contemporary material. So what is really great about all these dots here represent a particular particular software or tool. On the right-hand side here, so Tapor stands for Text Analysis Portal for Research. So you'll notice on the right-hand side here, all these categories. So if you know what you want to do specifically, you want to look at content analysis, for example, you can click on that and that will reduce it. I'll show you how to do that. This categories aren't just random. They are a taxonomy of digital research activities in the humanities. And this was created back in 2014. So it's called TDIRA, if you want. So that's the taxonomy of digital research activities in the humanities in created in 2014. So these are the activities under the categories that you would use. So if we're looking at a particular one here for content analysis, you'll notice I just got this little click here, content analysis, and it pulls up all these particular ones. And this one here is just pointing out this particular one here, text analyzer, that you can go and take a look at. Here we have natural language processing. This one here is the network corpus that's listed here. I believe it's been around for a while. And what's interesting, when you go in and you click on a particular tool in that, you get a page like this. And this is really useful. And I like pointing it out, is that it tells you, when was last updated, 2018. Where's the site? You can go to the site. It tells you what it does. And then it tells you, who to contact, creator site. It tells you the attributes. So what kind of license is it? Is it an open license anyone can use, or is it a freemium, that sort of thing? Or is it proprietary and you have to go buy it? So there's always these sorts of questions that you can ask right away. And it'll even tell you, is it easy to use or is it very difficult to use, that sort of thing. So analysis, if you're doing that TDIRA goals, it would be analysis, and methods is content analysis. And it also mentions on the right hand here, people have also selected something else here, in this case, Rita. So it's really great. It gets you from all this stuff that's out there down to something that's manageable that you can start playing with, okay? So it looks kind of intimidating, all that, so I encourage you to go take a look at it. Now, let's say you have a few texts, not many, and you say, Kev, I just want to take a look at something very quickly, get basic word counts and that sort of thing. How would I go about doing that? Well, there's a great website out there called Voyant, and you'll notice here that you can upload, you can add your text right in here, cut and paste, or you can upload here. They also have under open here, they've got Shakespeare's works, Jane Austen's works, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as examples. So if you're not too sure, you want to play around with it, you can go in and take a look at these. these works. So here I picked Jane Austen's works, and as you can see, you've got the word cloud, you've got the reader here, the terms. You look at trends, trends in the document, and then at the bottom half here, you have a particular document, and you can look at the words, keyword in context. Here's Mr., for example. On the left-hand side here, you have, these are 8 documents in that, but they mean by novels, and it tells you how many words and that sort of thing, and what's the shortest in that, vocabulary density, all these sorts of things, just to get you started experimenting with. So it's kind of cool. I encourage you to upload your own text and see what you get from that. I should also mention too that you can compare two different two items. So for example, an earlier edition of the Declaration of Independence with the finalized version, so you can put them side by side and see how they change. So it's a nice little platform that's useful for doing that sort of project. All right, so legal and ethical issues. I mentioned copyright, fair use, DRM, AI. Oh my. I'm doing a webinar on legal and ethical issues regarding text data mining on October 23rd. So I encourage you to sign up for that. Should be very interesting, covering what you can and can't do and that sort of thing. So, all right. So we're looking at these particular general areas here, copyright. Can I digitize or download text? Can I run analysis on them? Non-consumptive use is a concept, and it is an allowed exemption within copyright law. So what that means is you can't read it. You can use the text data set. You can search it and all that, but you can't go in there and read it. That's what they mean by non-consumptive. So things you learn, right? Next, you have contracts. So what is available in terms of licensing contracts? So libraries, we have access to a lot and we can negotiate, but there will always be a cost of extra money. And also important is the text, is that particular text available in that particular database? So sometimes the company may have only been able to acquire parts of a collection or something that is partially digitized. So this could impact your research. Privacy and ethics. So you have archives, for example. What can you get access to that has not been restricted because of the donor? There are state privacy laws, or another example to think about. And you also have international issues. So text data analysis exemptions can vary from country to country and continent to continent. So U.S. and European Union law are different. They're similar, but they are different. So we had the Babysitters Club here, and some digital humanists got together and said, hey, let's see if we can get some text. So what they did is that they ended up scanning, OCRing all this text and putting it into their own little database. You are allowed to do that. If you have print material, you can scan it and save it for yourself. That is allowed within the DMCA, but you cannot share it with anyone. So there are limitations in that regard. All right. So what happened in 2021 is that there was carved out an exemption for folks who want to do text data mining. So there were some narrow exemptions that were allowed. Excuse me. So here's the actual text. I'm not going to read it for you. I'll be sending the slides out and you can take some time reading it later. But they did allow a 3-year limit. And they allow certain individuals to have this exemption. So 3-year exemption. What happens after 3 years? Qualified researchers at institutions. Persons on the street, forget about it. So you have to be a qualified researcher. That you're able to create data sets from this, but you cannot share them. So continuing with the Babysitters Club, they looked at this and they said, oh, great, we could do this. But what they found is that they went to, the ebook distributors and that, but the ebook distributors had contractual languages that prohibited them from making use of the DMC exemption to break the DRM. So even though it was legal, the licensors said no way. So even worse news is that even if they were able to negotiate a better contract with these licensors, there's some super difficult security requirements that their particular home institution, Stanford University, would have to resolve. So it became quite cumbersome. So, going with the original step of getting the books, scanning them, making sure they're OCR readable, time consuming, but worthwhile for them in terms of their project in the end. So you're looking at the various different types of contracts that you can have. So libraries have particular contracts that we can do. Gale, ProQuest, HathiTrust are examples. So you really want to talk with your librarian. Hey, how you doing? And see where you can go, what options that you have. And of course, privacy and ethics, how you're handling the data. Can you make it public? Has it been anonymized? These are just some of the questions you have to ask with regards to privacy and ethics. Like I said, I'm doing a workshop in October, and we'll go into greater detail with regards to that. Number 5, funding and expenditures. So you got to look at funding, you got to look at the time and the labor that you're putting in. So if you're looking at a grant, it's a statement of intent. What are the benefits? What will be the benefits beyond the project and the project team? So for the funder, the discipline, who's funding you, the particular discipline, your campus, the public, who gets return on that investment. So grant is, couched as a sales pitch and contains a plan of action, demonstrates expertise and experience, and it offers a return on that particular investment. So you have stakeholders for this project if you're going out and getting a grant. So look at your locals first, right? Your internal grants within your department. Maybe they have something for grad students. You never know until you ask. At CUA, we have the Office of Sponsored Programs and Research Services. You can always reach out to them. And also, you may want to look at state councils, in this case, humanities councils. Sometimes they're willing to give you small grants to work on projects. If you're looking at the state and national level, you also have, that's one of them, but you can also have at the national level, National Endowment for Humanities, National Institutes of Health, and National Science Foundations will also have grants. So you also have third foundations. So between the state institutions, the governments and that, they usually have deadlines that you have to apply for. For places like foundations, they also have they can accept applications year-round. So something to consider. So again, I mentioned time and labor, your time and labor, and you also have to consider if you're bringing other people in, even if it's temporary, you have to think about their other time and labor. So number 6, products and discoverability. So where does your final product and data go? Places to put your products. So what is it that you hope to create and build here? So, dissertations, white papers. White papers, you have to write them for your people who funded your grants and that sort of thing. So conference papers, journal articles, blogs, books, software, all these particular ones, code documentation, GitHub, for example, great. Raw and derived data, you can put that up, and if you're allowed to make it available to people. So these are sorts of questions that you have to ask. There are data repositories out there, again, that you can submit stuff to. So you're basically looking at what is the legacy of your work. You just don't want to die and disappear. So that is essentially the workshop, a quick 30,000 feet overview of that. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask? Well, okay. I don't have anyone here. So if that is the case, I'm going to say thank you very much. Remember, if you have not registered beforehand, do send me an email and I'll send you all the good stuff and the recordings and everything else. So thank you very much, everyone, for showing up. And I am available for research consultations. That's Gunn, Gunn, @coa.edu. So thank you very much.